Hytale's ex CEO Simon Hypixel has just come out on Twitter claiming he is potentially willing to buy back Hytale from Riot Games for millions of dollars. Could this be real hope or just a pipe dream? Because if you didn't know, Hytale was cancelled this week, and since then devs have been coming out of the woodwork to share their experiences with the team. From horror stories to frustrated and emotionally traumatized team members, it has not been pretty. Simon already made a big statement about his time running the company and where he thinks the direction of the game went wrong. Make sure to see my last video. Adding on to that today, he said, "It's sad that no one will be able to experience the music, art, and sounds coming together in Hytale. There are no other games like this. The talented builders, artists, composers, and everyone else were truly the greatest creatives I have ever met. You would just wander in-game for hours, immersed in this beautiful world that felt like home. The amount of content the game had was immense, and that was my experience 5+ years ago, so imagine today." End quote. Now, we've seen devs say this so many times, that even just walking around in that old engine was a breath of fresh air, that they could get lost for hours just wandering in circles due to the atmosphere and the movement mechanics. It's always something I wish we could have had whilst waiting. Even from the start of this tweet, you can tell that Simon is already getting nostalgic and potentially contemplating. He continues, "Everyone loses by not getting Hytale. There are no winners. Even those who are capitalizing to promote their games this week in the replies have greatly learned from what was accomplished. A unique, artistic experience that only a handful of people ever got the chance to be a part of." He said, "I have tried all games like Minecraft or Hytale out there, all of them. None gave me the feeling of walking around in Hytale. No one has managed to merge art of all kinds like Hytale, from the art to the engineering coming together to create a beautiful world. I wish there was something that could be done, but it's pretty much too late at this time." Now, don't get too worried about what he said there, because he does start to change his tune a little bit later, and to be honest, thinking about what he's saying here, I kind of feel like Simon may be romanticizing Legacy Engine just a little bit. We have to remember he is probably very fond and slightly biased towards those earlier days when things were much simpler. We have to admit that the Legacy Engine definitely wasn't perfect, but he's clearly confident enough to state that it was unlike any other experience out there at the time or since, which is a mighty claim to make. But if I trust anyone to have the time to play every block game and make that judgment, it would probably be Simon. Plus, when they announced the cancellation, the Hytale team did say that Riot helped them reach out to other investors to acquire the game. But did they ever actually ask Simon himself to come back and step up? He says, "Unfortunately, no, but it makes sense because they were probably looking for someone that could support the expenses of the team for years to come." Then, when pressed even further by a user about the odds of him buying Hytale, considering what a truly unique game it is, Simon followed up, quote, "I have not seen the game since 2019, so it would be hard for me to know if it's even worth looking into. It seems like the chapter is truly closed. I do have the money to run a 30-person team for a while, but they were over 150 people strong, so not sure what kind of beast it has become to handle." My friend and fellow Hytale creator Hugo then commented saying he thinks there's a very real opportunity here to look at buying back the IP, especially if it isn't crazy expensive. Just getting a couple of the OG developers back to get that OG vision of Hytale released. 30 people, just like in 2018, the original vision, the game it was meant to be. And if you think about it, it does make sense that they didn't go to Simon straight away, as Hypixel Studios did admit they went to places that could actually afford to take on the full development team. But I do think there may be other complicated reasons there why they didn't approach Simon. Possible legalities, and maybe even conflicting views on how the game should be developed moving forward. Either way, that may not be the case at all, as Simon quickly started to open up to the idea even more, stating, "Yeah, well, it would be a massive undertaking. I'm not sure I want to take on that responsibility. I'd need to open source some parts like the tools, and anything that would be spent on buying the IP would drain all of the funding for the game, so it's a bit difficult to deal with." He then continues, "I get it 100%. Look, I am even down to put $25 million by myself to finish Hytale. That's how much I believe in it. No Kickstarter, just raw passion, high pressure, and high risk taking." And that's the statement that's triggered every Hytale fan from here to Timbuktu. 25 million is not a small amount of money, and with it, Simon said he would, quote, "reduce scope, Legacy Engine would be PC only first, it would be open source in some areas, it would be a small team, and then they would cut unfinished features to accelerate towards a beta, get players in as soon as possible to support that development. I even already have a dozen Hytale legacy engine veterans working with me. That's what I would do, but I have not reached out. I'm just thinking about it now because of the bullying. This would be a massive challenge and impact all aspects of my life, so I'd probably even need to consult with my family first. And he's right, when Simon Hypixel left to begin a new game studio, he actually hired up a bunch of Hytale's OG developers who hopped over to his new game. He definitely has some of the staff and know-how to get Hytale back on track, but can he get Hytale? Whilst 25 million is a huge sum, it still pales in comparison to what we publicly know Riot Games spent on Hytale. We're talking over $30 to $40 million a year, so when we think about a price tag for the full thing, over 5 years of Riot development, honestly, it'd be a stretch to get it for anything under 200 to 300 million. Now, Simon is a pretty well-known guy, so at this point, all the Minecraft creators started jumping in, first with Tubbo, who was live at the time, quote-unquote bullying Simon into buying the game back. Creators like In the Littlewood and Bobbycraft, amongst hundreds of others, also added to the conversation, saying it's absolutely the right call, and that Undertale and Deltarune began as Kickstarters, so it wouldn't be an awful option. I honestly think Simon is a bit too proud for a Kickstarter, but I do think other investors or other entities could help co-fund something like a buyback. The studio Devolver Digital tweeted eye emojis, and even TeamSpeak chimed in. TeamSpeak there being vocal supporters of Hytale, likely due to Hytale's team being one of the only ones who uses TeamSpeak. No hate there, I'm sure they're wonderful, but the Devolver Digital tweet was a bit more exciting. Even if Riot Games for some reason didn't want to go with Simon himself, I still do think that the attention around this cancellation could get more eyes on the project, like in the case of Devolver Digital. Although we do have to remember that the Hytale game director spent the last months at the company flying around the world pitching this game with no luck. The team obviously tried to get this to continue, even without themselves being involved. They didn't just give up. It's a project they were incredibly passionate about, and I imagine they really did go to most of the companies who could actually afford this game. If we look at the options we have now, either Riot vaults the whole thing or chooses to continue the IP with an internal or entirely new dev team. In that case, I genuinely don't think Hytale will end up being anything like the original or even see the light of day. To me, this is still the most realistic pathway. The next option is Riot not caring about the IP too much and selling it back or partially back to the original owner or a group of investors willing to acquire the project and continue it. In that case, hopefully the new engine would be finished or the legacy build would be released to provide players something while they bide their time. But this is still very unlikely to me, as Riot Games has that new engine, its proprietary technology, and a great basis for a future platform. Why would they just give that away? Well, that's when we get to the third option. Simon himself said that a huge company made a much bigger offer for Hytale originally back in the early days, but he turned them down. Maybe that company is still prepared to pay up for the opportunity to own a potentially genre-defining platform. Those conversations, of course, would definitely be happening behind the scenes though, not on Twitter. We're not going to know about anything like that until it happens in months' time. But with all of this week's news and dev drama, plus Simon's $25 million tweet as the tipping point, the fire was lit for #SaveHytale. Everyone in the community now is trying their best to figure out how to revive or continue the legacy of this game. Minecraft YouTubers, of course, but also petitions are being signed, messages are being pushed to Riot, constant tweets, new game projects that are trying to recapture Hytale's style. Even I tried to rope Mr. Beast in at one point. Make sure to subscribe, by the way, speaking of YouTube. To be quite honest, buying Hytale back, I personally don't think it's too realistic of a goal, as I've said a few times in this video. I'm not sure Riot is the type of company to go back on their decisions, and they're still yet to make an official statement or give solid additional reasoning or any context around Hytale's cancellation. Does that mean they have a bigger announcement for the future of the game in store? Well, let's avoid getting too excited. That is what got us here in the first place. Riot is a big company, and big companies sometimes just need to be cutthroat. They sank hundreds of millions into Hytale at the end of the day, and would have likely had to sink at least a couple $100 million more to actually support the final development phases, the testing, then marketing, the beta, a build up to launch, plus because it's a live service, actually having to maintain that ecosystem until it turns a profit. They would have had to host all of the servers. It really would have stacked up quickly. And if it hadn't turned a profit at that point, Riot would be in a hole almost double the size of if it was to cut everything where it is now. The public statements by Hypixel Studios may have said Riot were very helpful, but as investors, they definitely did add pressure. More so, I think, than has been mentioned, and to the point where they clearly cut their losses in the end. Right now, the main focus though really needs to be on supporting the devs in any way we can, many of which all had their jobs kicked right from under them on the same day we all found out they had. And secondly, we need to focus on the truth, actually getting to the bottom of what really went wrong with Hypixel Studios and the development of Hytale. I have it on good authority that there's a very important, very serious story that needs to be told here, and that it all will inevitably come out. As your regular Kweebec covering Hytale news, you know that I'll be there to break it down, because I want clarity on all of this just as much as you guys. Make sure to subscribe, because now is seriously the obvious most important time ever to commit to a Hytale channel. Watch the video on screen because YouTube reads your watch patterns and knows exactly the perfect video that you want to watch next. Stay safe and keep free.